Winston Churchill once said, "A lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on." Fellow Toastmasters, there are many conspiracy theories and other untruths circulating online, fueled by the uncertainty surrounding the pandemic and the resulting impact on our lives. We're hungry for good news, proper instructions, and accurate predictions. Our appetite for knowledge is so immense, we'll eat any crap that's put in front of us. For example, recently I saw my niece had retweeted a post by Dr. Judy Mitkowitz, who claims that governments around the world were using the pandemic as an excuse for a power grab. I asked her if she believed it, and she said, "No, I don't, but it's an interesting theory." Would you retweet something like that? I wouldn't forward anything I read because it might be true. I'm someone who checks information from multiple reliable sources before I trust it. And I'll tell you where I got my information from so that you'll know that my information is credible. If you tell me something that I don't know, unless you're an expert, I'll probably ask, "How do you know?" Yeah, I get a lot of dirty looks, but of all my values, my credibility is the most important. So I need to know if I can trust what you say. We all read and hear things in the news, but I listen even harder for the source. When I hear the expression "experts say," it makes me ask, what experts? When I hear the information comes from a source close to the matter, I'll ask, what source? And if the news is based on a leaked memo, I'll be careful because it could have been an early draft of the memo with mistakes. When the Daily News reports about an ongoing trial, I won't even listen. You won't get to hear both sides, only the sensational stuff. And when I hear a recent study has determined, I'll ask, what study? Where was it published? You know what research studies you can believe in? Randomized controlled trials. That's the gold standard. Use RCTs to prove there's a cause-effect relationship and to eliminate bias. The main drawbacks of RCTs is that they take a long time and they're very expensive. Statistics. There's another type of information we depend on for decision making. Mark Twain said there are three kinds of lies. Lies, damn lies, and you know this one, statistics. Our lives depend on accurate statistics. We need them for sports, stock markets, weather, election results, and the efficacy and safety of a drug or treatment. In order for statistics to be a good predictor of the truth, they need to have high conclusive validity. A drug study with low conclusive validity could conclude that the drug works when it actually doesn't, or could conclude that the drug doesn't work when it actually does. Could conclude that the drug is safe when it isn't safe, or the drug isn't safe when actually the drug is safe. Ideally, all conclusions are backed by RCTs or high conclusive validity. So why do so many lies get passed around like facts? The two biggest reasons are the delusionary truth effect and truthiness. Let me define those. The delusionary truth effect is our tendency to believe false information after repeated exposure. Now be honest, how many of you think that Napoleon Bonaparte was a short man? Is 5'5" considered short? Because that's how tall he was. Ever since he was caricatured as short in an 1803 British cartoon, he's been repeatedly called short. Napoleon was, in fact, an average height man for his time. Now, what's truthiness? Truthiness is when we use emotion and our gut feeling to tell if something is true or not true. Your gut might be right, but it's not proof. But what kind of life would it be if you disbelieved everything that you read, you heard, or you saw? Who has the time to check the methodology of every study or survey? Let me share with you 2 ways that I protect my credibility and help me confidently say to someone, trust me. Number 1, get your news from reputable news outlets, not social media. And just remember that even if a source is named, the person may have been misquoted, or what they say could have been taken out of context. The second way to protect your credibility is to check the accuracy of questionable facts using fact-checking websites like Snopes.com, S-N-O-P-E-S, Snopes.com, factcheck.org, or use sciencebasedmedicine.org. Just the words, no spaces or dashes. Sciencebasedmedicine.org. Good fact-checking sites like these provide a full analysis of the evidence. So now you know my secret to protecting my credibility and to avoid passing on alternate facts, fake news, and pseudoscience. But what if you learn about world events from the wild, wild west known as the internet? If you're on a forum where people can post anything, then people will post anything. Facts be damned. Thanks to our right to freedom of expression. Someone could say that the world is flat, as loud as they want. No big deal, right? Or someone could say that the Holocaust was a hoax. That is a big deal. We have freedom of expression, right? Well, that isn't entirely true. Things you say or write could result in charges of libel, could be slander, obscenity, child pornography, sedition, hatred, or incitement. Who would be subject to the charges? The person who wrote it or the website where it appeared? The answer to that question should be simple. If the website or social media company has an anything goes policy, then the person who wrote it should be charged. The website is just the distributor, not a publisher. With a few exceptions, Section 230 of the U.S. Communication Decency Act protects providers of interactive computer services, that's their language. It protects them from being charged because of what their users write. While that protection is great for free speech, it isn't great for getting facts from those services. And that's where many people get informed about election information and news about the pandemic. The public was upset by all the untruths that were being circulated on these services, and they started applying pressure to internet companies to do something about these lies. But if these companies censor the postings, they become publishers and they lose the protection they have from Section 230. Fortunately, the internet companies have found a creative solution or two. What does Facebook do? They show postings that are clearly false lower in their news feed. And they add links to Wikipedia and to other fact-checking sites like Snopes. Twitter labels some of their tweets as misleading, disputed, and unverified, and will remove misleading posts that have the highest propensity for harm. Pinterest, maybe you get your news from there. They direct vaccine-related searches directly to health organizations. Even though this isn't censoring, our old friend Donald Trump took offense to having some of his tweets marked as possibly untrue. Oh my gosh. And he issued an executive order to change the status of social media sites to content publishers, which opens them up to charges for the illegal stuff that appears. I am not sure how the new US president is going to deal with this delicate balancing act, but I want you to know what you read online must always be taken with a grain of salt. In conclusion, we have access to more information sources now than ever before. And with our healthcare system and our economy undergoing change at light speed, we all want answers, and we want them now. Please be careful and check your facts. And remember, social media has its place, but it has no place being your source of the truth. Trust me.
So Ken, do we just ask you our questions?
Yes, I'm happy to entertain questions. Fire away. Anyone interested in asking me questions? Maybe they've been challenged by something and maybe they want to know what to say. Nicole, go ahead.
I find it actually quite interesting. There are lots of good thoughts and very sort of a mind-opening statement that you made there. The fact today is that I don't think there are any facts actually that we can, in my philosophy, I'm just running to, first question was, how do I know? And today I cannot know because, and again, it may be assumption that most of the media are owned only by few people, by a few people. Now, I may check, they say CNN or the New York Times, but it may be owned by the same person or the same group of people, which have their own philosophy, which they allow or disallow the thing. So as much as I check different sources, I still am not any smarter because basically it's only one source in different media. So how do I know? I very often would just go, and you mentioned it, kind of a, how do I know the people? How do I kind of can assume they react? But I cannot check the facts because even the facts checking thing, like my wife was censored yesterday because the Let's Twist Again had some obscene words in it and the sound was taken out. And so how do I know that the fact checkers actually check the facts or they again try to, I don't know. So
That's good. That's a good question. It depends on what's being discussed. So one of the most hotly debated subjects recently has been the US election. And as you probably know, it's very polarized there. There's the left media, the liberal media, and there's the conservative media. It's important to understand when you're referring to a source of information, whether that media is liberal leaning or conservative leaning. And there's a website that I will send you the name of. It escapes me just at the moment. But what they do is they take a question and they will provide the answer to that question from both liberal and conservative media and show you how the different sides are answering the same question differently. That's one way to get more than one side of the argument. Also, I mentioned when it comes to scientific research, knowing what the methodology is and whether it was a randomized controlled study really helps you understand. But once it's been peer reviewed, which means that other scientific organizations have looked at their methodology and they have agreed that it is sound, or they've repeated similar tests and they got similar results, then you can have more confidence in it.
Well, that may very well work with the scientist fact, that's all, but it certainly doesn't work with the political facts. Like we would swear that Trump would never have any followers because nobody dare to mention the word Trump and say, I vote for him. And yet half of the United States was on his side. And yet in the media, you would not see it. Same, you say we have a law, and yet you have a Supreme Court, and it depends whether the judge is a Democrat or Republican, which makes a mockery of everything that we know, that the law is the law, because it depends who is the judge. And same then comes to the facts checkers, same comes for the posters, they comes, so eventually you say, how do people react? How do they feel? Does it make sense how it, that's the way I kind of look at it. But you're right.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Can I hear if anyone else wants to ask me a question, since I've presented my material and you might have questions after hearing it or even before? Hi, Louise.
I definitely like the point you made about not wanting to hear the news when something is in action. There's nothing more frustrating than hearing a live story or that's happening now when they haven't been able to assess the entire circumstances, and what they give you at face value is not necessarily what the outcome comes out to be later on. So I do like that point. The point is though so many media continue to do this. And why does this not have a negative repercussion on the media for deciding that, you know what, we're going to wait till we know the whole story before we put out stuff that's going to lead to possibly a belief in false information? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I sympathize with you completely. One way to avoid the daily deluge of incomplete information is to get your information from something that's more considered. So instead of a daily publication or an up to the second news information, read Newsweek, which comes out once a week, or Time Magazine, which has time to research both sides of an issue and present a more in-depth analysis. You will not get an in-depth analysis in the 20, 30-second reports that come from the scroll at the bottom of the news feed or the on-the-street reporter who is in one place only getting one point of view. So that's how I would address things. Don't worry about what's happening at the moment. Imagine if all your dealings on the stock market were based on, unless you're a day trader, today's activities. You would have missed a nice recovery right after the pandemic hit its bottom. So it pays to be patient. News agencies, they just can't afford to be patient because they're afraid of being scooped. How about anyone else? Chris is first and then Kevin.
Okay, mine might be relatively quick. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the use of caveats and how that impacts your credibility. So if there was a news story and you said, you know, I've heard this, it sounds reasonable to me, it came from this source, so I'm not sure you can 100% rely on it, you're sort of couching it in a caveat, but you're still endorsing it in a way, as opposed to just sitting back and waiting until you have absolutely all of the facts. How do you think that impacts your credibility?
I think when somebody uses caveats, what they're really saying is, there's information out there, here's what may make it more believable or less believable, and you can be the judge. And I think that speaks to the intelligence of the person who you're speaking to. I'm not telling you that this is black or if it's white. I'm saying it might be black and it might be white because of this. When two intelligent people have a conversation, and if they don't have firsthand knowledge of something, if they use caveats, I think that commands respect. I think it pays to be a bit incredulous so that you're not repeating information that maybe turns out later to be untrue. I don't know how other people get through their careers without having credibility as a valuable commodity. I'm giving advice to people, I'm producing product for people, and if everyone looked at that and said, well, you know, he's constantly providing information that can't be trusted, well, you know, I don't think that would serve me well. I think you're okay to use caveats. I think more people should use caveats. How's that? Good enough an answer?
Thank you. No, appreciate that.
Thank you. Kevin, I wanted to hear your question now, please.
Yes, I'm wondering, are there news agencies, established news agencies that you do trust, or do you check up on like every story that you read? And if so, like how long does that take? Like how much time do you devote to doing that? Because it sounds like a big endeavor.
Well, there's only been a few things recently that have consumed my attention. So I think it's fair to say that it's not as complicated when you're focused on maybe what's happening in the American election. But when I read in the New York Times something, I'm not reading an opinion. I'm reading what evidence gathering they've done. And perhaps that can be used to help me decide if that has on the balance of probabilities, to be more believable than something else. Plus, the site that I mentioned with fact-based science, one of the best parts about that website is that it doesn't tell you, believe this. They tell you what the evidence is for that particular opinion, and they also allow a discussion from the people who visit that site to say, well, that evidence is flawed and here's why. And then other people can say, yeah, but this other evidence is just as flawed and maybe this one is better. So I think when you know what the evidence is and you're allowed to see a balance of different points of view, then you'll be able to make up your own mind. And I don't argue, Rosti, that certain media outlets might not present a balanced view, but you should go into it understanding that they might have a left-leaning view or a right-leaning view, and take that information with a grain of salt. Now, I can see from the timekeeper's background that we've run out of time, and I want to say that you're all intelligent people. You all want to know what the truth is, and I want you to respect that not everybody wants to tell you the truth. But if you do hear something that sounds a little suspicious, don't be afraid to say, how do you know? Madam Toastmaster.
Thanks very much, Ken. I really did appreciate that. And I really appreciate you joining us tonight. So as part of our normal flow, and I think it makes sense now, so we're not having an evaluation, but if we could take, Heather, if we could take a couple of minutes, and if people want to just shoot some quick feedback to Ken through the chat session and give a little bit of feedback that way, that I think makes sense. So if you can, Heather, if you can pop up after 2 minutes and let us know when the time's up, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.